Let me bring you back to the year of 2018. If you were a Sonic fan back then, I'm sure I just gave you non-flashbacks of what it was like in the dystopian wasteland. There was a great famine, children were hungry, it was kill or be killed, all because people didn't have any new dope-as-hell Sonic the Hedgehog toys. That wasn't to say there weren't options, there was always Tomy. Though many people didn't think too highly of them, with their hit-or-miss sculpts and extreme lack of variety, which left one option for Sonic figures. A company from the past, which was seen as the generous lord of Sonic toys. A company that couldn't be topped with its quality, dedication, and love for the source material. What else but Jazwares? Starting in 2008 and ending in 2013, the Jazwares Sonic line is easily worthy of that title. They made the most accurate, high-quality, and flat-out amazing figures to date. From 3-inch to 5-inch to 10-inch, they were absolutely legendary. But like all things, it had to come to an end. By 2014, Jazwares had cancelled their Sonic line, ending what was seen as one of the best not only just Sonic, but video game toy lines ever made. With all this, all eyes were on Sega to pick up the slack and give a license to someone who could match and maybe even beat Jazwares, Sonic with giraffe shit on him, which takes us back to near present day, where after the Tomy Sonic line was completely dead in the water, it was announced that Jakks Pacific would take on the role as Sonic's master toy partner. With expectations not very high after the last 4-year roller coaster that was Tomy, and not even a roller coaster like Expedition Everest, nah, we're talking about the Mitten. The line began later that year, and to May's surprise, Jakks ended up being pretty damn good. They had a slightly rocky start with those really mid-bendy figures, but in 2020 they finally started the articulated action figure line. It was phenomenal. After waiting so long for a brand new, high-quality Sonic figure that doesn't look like a middle schooler in 2018, it was finally here. And they kept going, making character after character. Playsets, movie stuff, everything. Sonic's now back on top of the toy market, and because of that, a burning debate has started within the Sonic fandom. Shocker, I know. Which is better, Jazwares or Jakks? Well, that's why I'm here today, to finally answer that question and see what's objectively, factually the better Sonic toy line. Because that's my life at this point. And by the way, this is only really for the figures, since I doubt many people are super hyped about comparing classic Amy plushes. We'll be comparing both companies in a series of categories and going over the data, seeing which company lands on top when it's all said and done. Oh, and apparently only 32% of you guys are subscribed, so if you could just hit that little old button, it'd make me giggle. But anyway, let's finally end this debate, or at least make an attempt to. Alright, now on a good clean fight. So there's not really much of an order to go in with these, so I guess let's just start with character variety. There's a decent amount to go over here, considering it's not as cut and dry as you think. If we looked at Jazwares' 3-inch line, for example, and counted it all up, we'd find that there's 29 unique characters made in the 3-inch scale. But that wasn't all the 3-inch line. Many characters came with scaled minifigures of smaller characters. So if we add all those up, we get a grand total of 37 3-inch characters, plus 8 variants of already existing figures. But as we know, Jazwares made a lot more figures than just 3-inch. Like for example the Superposers, which have no new characters at all, Giga-Rip. Though if we move over to their 5-inch line, we get some new stuff here, with there being 3 characters exclusive to this scale, all from Sonic and the Black Knight. But that wasn't all, since they also made this Sonic Colors figure, which included 2 Wisp figures. So adding those to our total, we come out with a grand total of 42 unique characters that Jazwares has made, and 10 variants on top of that. Now let's see how Jakks compares. But before we do though, I should specify that I'm only going to be including things that were announced or leaked before the Vector and Ray Wave. Since Jakks is still going strong, it wouldn't be fair to include all the stuff coming out next year, so figures like Big and Chaos aren't going to be included here, so it's 4 years each. Since Jazwares really started their line in 2009, let's be real. But anyway, starting with their 4-inch line, adding it all up gives us 32 unique characters right off the bat, and another 10 being variants. But as we know, Jakks isn't just 4-inch, their 2-inch line comes out at 26 characters, 11 of which being exclusive to that scale, and another 10 variants, bringing our grand total to 43 unique characters and 20 variants. And we have another unique character included in the Modern Collector figure, being the Laser Wisp. But beyond those, there's a major line we haven't even mentioned yet, being the Sonic movie line. In total with both scales, we get 6 new characters alongside 7 more variants, bringing our grand total of Jakks' unique characters to 50 figures, and a whopping 27 more variants. Safe to say Jakks takes the cake on this one, not only winning with new characters, but destroying in variants. 1 point for Jakks, now on to category 2, accuracy. Now for okay, I wrote Jazwares. It's kind of a disadvantage, since their main line consisted of mainly small 3-inch figures, which as you could assume are way harder to add intricate details into compared to their bigger figures. Granted, it's not really big of an issue with Sonic, since the characters aren't really all too complex, but it's still worth mentioning. But how do the figures hold up? Well, pretty great. Despite the small size, it's clearly Sonic in the gang. The sculpts here are really good, they look insanely close to their generation's counterparts, and the figures have got pretty nice details for being so small. Like a lot of the paint details on these guys are super well done and surprising they were able to get it this nice looking. That all was when it was applied correctly however, but we'll get to that later. Though most characters were lacking a defined mouth, making it kinda hard to read their expression. Though that's not really an issue exclusive to Jazwares. And besides 3-inch, it gets even better. Like their 5-inch line, which are probably the most accurate Sonic action figures to ever be made. Especially with characters like Excalibur Sonic and Sir Galahad, who just look phenomenal here. But the others like Classic and Modern Sonic look straight out of Generations. And while they did do those, they did have the absolute train wreck that was Downward Krill Supersonic Superposer. Speaking of articulation though, that's probably Jazzwares' biggest downside in terms of accuracy. Since there's so many joints on the figures, it makes them look less and less like their actual counterparts. But in all honesty, you get used to it pretty quickly, plus it does give them a wide range of movement, which is a pretty fair trade-off. Moving on to Jakks, it's honestly pretty good too. You got 4-inch figures now, which allow for much easier detailing and paint application, plus ones that weren't even all too feasible on the 3-inch ones, like metallic inhibitor rings for Shadow. Plus now most of the characters have detailed mouths, instead of just being slightly sculpted in. But beyond stuff like that, Jakks has had a few odd decisions design-wise. Like for example, they had this weird fixation with having characters' mouths gaping open for no apparent reason. Like some characters just don't want to shut their trap and it doesn't really make much sense. Like why didn't they just keep these closed? With the worst offender being Amy, with her mouth gaping open to let the demons escape. They did do the same thing with Vector, but at least there it works a lot better since his mouth is such an integral part of his design. Amy's just baffling to me. And even then there's some more odd choices. Like having 4-inch classic figures exist. Like these things are just massive, they scale horribly. I mean Jazzwares' scaling was off too, but it was never this blatant. Or the movie figures having Knuckles' face, or that weird paint blob on Sonic's chest. Or heck, the Wave 2 movie figures not even having Sonic and Knuckles' eyes be red and blue like when they're supposed to be charged up like this, what the fuck? None of these are really massive issues at all, just minor mistakes that Jazzwares didn't do as much, so I'm giving them the point here. On to the third competition, quality control. With Jazzwares, it's not really all too cut and dry, since their major problems were more towards the end of their line. Like the modern Metal Sonic they released was coated in this dope metallic paint, it looked sick, it was one of the best figures, but the classic one they released towards the end of their line was just absolutely horrendous, having no metallic paint, no chest details, no bitches. The paint was so awful sometimes it even ruined the figure. However, that's not to say the line was once perfect, since while the figures having all these joints was great and all, they really weren't built long term, considering that many, and I mean many Jazzwares figures broke very easily. Kids play with them as kids do, and within like a week of bending all those joints back and forth to make Sonic kill Darth Vader to just snap right off. And that's not even mentioning the other parts of their figures, like the 87,000 blazes I've seen which are tail-phobic. It got so bad that a lot of their figures would just break right out of the box. It was horrendous. They could fix a broken joint by just gluing it on and putting it on a shelf so you never touch it again. Paint isn't all too fixable. While the paint looked pretty good sometimes, others, eek, it was no good. I think characters' eyes got it the worst, like Free Rider Sonic being the obvious example, with his eyes being able to teach a trigonometry class. If we take it over to Jakks though, it's clear that they were just built different, because these guys were infinitely more durable than Jazzwares, it's no competition. They've got really nice hard joints which allows for them to be dropped and not literally die, and the hinges use ball joints which can easily just be popped right on and off. However, in the paint department, some things never change. God, that movie was awful. Considering that the paint here isn't the most stellar, it's good most of the time, but when it's bad, it can be bad. Take my 4-inch classic Sonic, for example, whose eye decided to turn on motion blur. But like I said, those huge mistakes don't happen too often. But I mean, they managed to make Jim Carrey Eggman look this good for a $10 figure, so these guys can paint. But for now, this one goes to Jakks. On to the fourth category, the Chocolate High Dive! But for real though, pricing. For Jazzwares, I thought it'd be kinda hard to find out how much they retailed for, since they're obviously out of stock everywhere. That wasn't until one of my Chad friends was just like, I got you fam. So if we look at their standard 3-inch figures, a single card release for one of them would cost you $6 USD, which is pretty fair all things considered when you realize how base they were. The comic book packs retailed for $16, which was a tad sussy-wussy considering the figures would be $12, and then at the time Sonic comics retailed for $2.50, so what gives? The 3 packs they did retailed for $21, which may not seem the best at first glance, but they had all the accessories in them, so that balances out. For 5-inch single cards, each one was 13 bones, over double the 3-inch price, which honestly I think is pretty fair since they're almost double the size, plus extra details and all. But double packs were $21, a pretty good deal for what they are. And finally, the 10-inch figures came in at $30, a phenomenal deal if you ask me. Now let's see how Jakks compares. Now for them, their 4-inch figures retail for $10, which compared to Jazzwares is pretty good, and each figure comes with an accessory, so it's very fair. However, Jakks has adopted a pretty expensive business model with accessories, which is making brand new accessories only to release them alongside re-released figures in a wave, forcing people to buy figures they already own just for a new accessory. While Jazzwares did do this towards the end of their line, the accessories included were dope enough to warrant a rebuy, and plus the figures themselves had brand new joints, so they weren't just complete re-releases. It was justified for the consumer, unlike here. But anyway, for the 2-inch figures, each one's $5, whether it be in a box or not, which again is a decent price considering that these don't come with anything. And if we get onto the 2 packs they just started doing, they're only $18, and 3 packs are $27, so with each one you buy you get $1 off. Or you could pay $20 for a playset, which are always pretty well done for your buck. However, the more we move up in the price, the less we seem to get. For example, the collector figures, which retail for a gross $50. Don't get me wrong, these are pretty good figures, but the price is outrageous. Jazzwares released their 10-inch Sonic, Classic Sonic, and Metal Sonic for $30 each, with all having amazing detail and accuracy. But Jakks makes this decent-looking Sonic with not really all too much special about him, apart from having the same face pieces with different printing 3 times, and having less articulation than the Jazzwares figures. Though you could make the argument of, oh, it has a base, that's why it's so expensive. But nah, Tomy made an infinitely better version of this figure for only $30, and that f***er came with a base too. And the modern one's slightly better, I guess, but this is still some bullshit. I'm giving this one to Jazwares, since when they were good, they were good. Now we get to the final category, being product availability. With Jazwares, Sonic was pretty big back when they had the license. Generations had come out, Colors had come out, Mario and Sonic. It was a good time to be a Sonic fan. So they got shelf access in a decent amount of stores, like Target, GameStop, Amazon, and I'm sure many other smaller chains nobody even knows about. However, I'm sure as you all know, Toys R Us. We've all seen the videos, the ones with shelves lined and lined with Jazwares stuff. Pretty much every figure ever made just kind of chilling there. It was a truly magical time to be a collector, walking into this magical wonderland of plastic and virginity. So you think it'd be hard for Jakks to beat, but in all honesty, it's not really all too different on face value. You can get their stuff at Target, GameStop, Amazon, etc. However, the one store that gives Jakks a massive lead over Jazwares is the Blue Behemoth, Walmart. In the last year or two, we've seen tons of Jakks products showing up in their toy aisle. Figures, plushes, playsets, everything. I'm not sure if anybody knows this or not, but there were never any Jazwares products in Walmart. I don't blame anyone for thinking that there were, considering it just makes sense, but nothing ever showed up there. But I see you over there thinking Jazwares has a secret weapon up their sleeve, something that can annihilate Jakks in one fell swoop. Toys R Us. But the thing is, they don't. The only reason Jazwares would beat them here is because Toys R Us was in business when they had the license. Jazwares had nothing to do with that, that was all just Toys R Us going bankrupt. If Toys R Us was still around today, the amount of Jakks products they would have there would be mental. Especially with the movie and all its merch, there would be mounds upon mounds of shelf space. I mean, hell, have you seen how big their World of Nintendo section was? It was nutty. Hell, they technically did get into Toys R Us, with Macy's based-ass Toys R Us pop-up stores. They carry Jakks products. I have them to thank for my crab meat. Jakks is the winner here, they're just everywhere at this point. So with that, we have all the data we need. Now we can finally tally up the score and find what's definitively, objectively, the better Sonic the Hedgehog toy line. Drum roll, please. It is... Jakks Pacific. Coming in with a score of 3-2, Jakks has taken home the W here. Now we can finally end this debate once and for all. And I'm sure after this video is released, there will be absolutely no more debates on this topic ever again in the history of man. We can all live in Kumbaya in the middle of Whoville. But anyway, I guess that wraps this up. So thanks for watching and listening to me analyzing boomers and suits making plastic. I found it pretty interesting to compare these two, putting biases aside and just looking at their histories. Now you may be thinking after all this, what's my personal opinion? Throwing all the facts and logic we looked at out the window, what's in my opinion the better Sonic toy line? Well, I'd have to say, 100%, without a doubt,